Arrow Season 5, Episode 5, Human Target. This episode I thought was pretty cool. We got to see a lot of good team dynamics. We got to see Diggle actually come back into the fold. He has like a new helmet for his Spartan outfit. It's like, basically it's just a black helmet to kind of match the rest of his outfit. But he comes back into the fold. We get the Human Target comes into play. And we actually get the ending of Tobias Church. I was kind of surprised that they actually killed him off in this episode. I thought it would go on for a little bit longer, but he finds out that Oliver is, of course, Green Arrow, or the Green Arrow is Oliver, I should say. And so they go through this whole little process, and it's like, all right, Rene told him this secret. He didn't even remember telling them. And so once he ends up escaping and they save Rene, it's like, hey, he knows that you're the Green Arrow, or he knows that you're Oliver Queen. I don't know why I keep saying that. But he knows that you're Oliver Queen. So they have to figure out how in the world are they going to stop this guy who now knows the secret behind the Green Arrow. He knows that Green Arrow and Mayor Oliver Queen are one and the same, and they have to figure out how they're going to deal with that. And I like the way they did it. I thought it was pretty cool. I figured him being shot was fake. Even from the promo, I was like, oh, I'm assuming that this is going to end up being fake. And then when it happened, I was like, okay, how is this going to play out? Because I thought it was just going to be like, oh, he got fake shot and he was like, he was wounded, but he wasn't killed because they knew what happened. But then he does the, they pronounce him dead and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think, they'd have that play. And then it's like a double twist because it ends up not even being Oliver. It actually turns out that, I think it was like, there were quite a few scenes that they did it super, super early, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like, we assume that he's going to attack, so it was probably right after the scene where Diggle was like, I'll call in a friend that I know. It was probably right after that. May have all been, the Human Target and not actually Oliver. But I like the way they did it. I thought it was pretty cool, and, it comes down and, it's the Human Target. And we find out that a lot of these scenes, including him talking to the reporter and him talking to, one of the council people, all of that was the Human Target. He's like, I was the one that did it, but it's because of you. Like, I have to know who I'm imitating more than that person even knows themselves. So I thought that was pretty cool. And he kind of drops that quick little bomb on Oliver, like, oh, and Felicity moved on, you should too. And he's like, oh, you didn't know that. I assumed you did because the guy randomly comes in. But, that leads to, the little scene with Felicity and Oliver, and it's, no big deal. He now knows the truth about her being with someone else, and he doesn't really care, and he's at least considering the possibility of moving on. Who knows if he'll ever actually end up calling that reporter, but there's the possibility of it, I guess, that he might end up talking to her for a little bit. But he does now have his month to kind of prove that he's a good mayor, so that she just kind of backs off of all the attacks and stuff, and if he doesn't prove to be a good mayor, then, open season, as the Human Target put it. So I kind of like that idea. It allows him to kind of just, it's also a good way for them to kind of get rid of her character for a little bit, because it was clear that she was solely being like a bit of an antagonist. So it's a simple way to be like, all right, well, she's out of here for a little bit, and maybe she will come back into play as, a love interest for Oliver if he decides to, do that. Or, eventually once they go through the season and they, get past this month, then she'll come back and she'll just be a reporter again. It's like, all right, no attacks, but I will, kind of just ask you this and that because I have questions, like a normal reporter. I want to know about this and I want to know about that as well. So I think that's kind of how they might play her character. I assume that Oliver might call her. I think that'll be a big thing, at least at some point in the season. I think a part of him is going to be like, all right, I really should move on and try to find the next person that will accept me for Oliver Queen as well as, Green Arrow, once he decides to tell that person, if, ever. But I liked what they did with this, and I thought the action was pretty good in this episode. I really enjoyed the action, actually. And, they have the cool scene where they're kind of interrogating people and stuff like that. And it was pretty fun. And then they go through their mission at the end of the episode, and it's like the whole team working together. So we have, of course, Green Arrow, we have Artemis, we have Spartan, we have Mr. Terrific, I guess. They still don't really call him that, so it's still kind of just Curtis. But the one thing that I thought was really crazy is that they go through this whole episode and stuff, and so, Rene is sent to Diggle to kind of, recuperate, and so that Diggle can help him remember, or kind of help him go through his own mind and figure out what's going on with Church. Like, there's got to be something you heard that you remember it's in there. You just have to think about it, even though it might hurt to think about such a horrible moment. And we get some good backstory on Rene about why he was dishonorably discharged and just the way he feels and stuff like that. And of course, and I knew this was going to happen, but they have the scene, of course, where Tobias Church is like, we send it to like 04 and 72 or whatever. And I was like, I know that they're going to do it where he remembers that later. Like, I knew that as soon as it happened. I'm like, these are just random flashes of him waking up here and there. This is definitely going to come back at the end of the episode. So I already expected that. But what I didn't expect was when the whole team goes out, they let Rene go on the mission still. And I was like, I know, it was clear that it had been like, I would assume it had to have been like a couple of days, because he was like completely wounded. Like when they first showed him after they rescued him, his eye was like 100% black. And then, it kind of heals up over time and it's kind of just like, red and stuff. It's not like just completely black. So it was clear that it had been a couple of days, throughout, some of the scenes. But they get to the end and it's like, all right, we're going to do our mission and everything. And Diggle goes to Rene and he's like, are you coming? He's like, no, I'm going to stay behind. It's like, the last thing you guys need is, someone slowing you down. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Because he has one eye. But Diggle does like the inspirational speech thing. And he's like, I put on this, mask and it'll, to help me kind of redeem myself. And maybe your mask can do the same for you. And then do like the inspirational thing where he looks at the mask and he looks up. And I'm like, you can't do an inspirational scene where a guy looks down at the mask like, I can do this. And he looks up and he's like this. Like, he shouldn't have been in that fight with one eye. He was still, way too wounded. Like, I know it's technically one eye, but if he can't even open his eye, that means that he's way easier to hurt. Like, he's still insanely wounded if he can't even open his eye. That's still a literal sore spot on his face. And the rest of his head was still cut up from being punched so much with brass knuckles. And I was just thinking, like, there's no way that he should be, fighting during this mission. And, like, with Curtis, he'd been stabbed in the back, but like I mentioned, it was clear that it had been a couple of days. So I think for him it was a little bit easier because he got, like, a cut. It wounded him because it was in such a, interesting place, like being in his back. I'm sure that was a very unique sense of pain, but that I could see healing over, a couple of days, because technically it was just a stab wound, which clearly, it didn't hit anything vital. It was just like, holy crap, I got stabbed in the back. But Rene got the crap beat out of him, and he was also stabbed. I mean, it was a lesser stab. It wasn't like, up, near like his heart and stuff, like in the back, the back of his, chest cavity. But still, Rene got beat up like crazy for, they mentioned it was like 20 hours. He was there for almost a full day just getting beat up on and everything. And I would assume it was over 24 hours because they did some weird stuff with time. Because I mentioned it had been a couple of days with Rene after he was healed. But they did that early on in the episode too. And it was really weird how they messed around with the time of day. Because they have a scene where they get to the facility where Rene was being held at. And it's I can't think of his actual name, but they're, Ragman and Sharp. And they both go in there. It's like broad daylight, and it's like, oh, he was here and stuff. And it's like, Oliver promised that I would only tell him, Rene's position, and I wouldn't share it with the team. And I was like, all right, that makes sense why it would skip to day and night, but it just seems so weird. It was like they had that one scene, it's broad daylight, and then the next scene it was nighttime because Oliver was doing his mayor stuff all day, so he didn't get to go. They didn't get to do the rescue mission until the end of the night. And then they did that in some other scenes as well, where it was like, this scene is in broad daylight, and then the very next scene is like nighttime or something. And I thought that was kind of weird how they kind of played around with time in this episode. But I just thought it was weird. I was like, there's no reason Rene should be fighting, in this episode. During that infight, it made sense, have him kind of go up against Church, which still didn't have like that crazy impact. Like he had a hilarious scene when he was like, are you scared yet? And he called him a bitch. I thought that was really funny. But he has that little fight, and then that big explosion happens, and Church takes off, and I was like, oh, he didn't really, it wasn't like I expected. I thought Rene would have, the typical sort of superhero thing where the hero comes back and they get revenge on the villain, and he would have beat him, but that actually didn't even end up happening. It was Oliver again. So, they go through the whole process and stuff, and as surprising as it was to me that Church was actually killed by Prometheus at the end of the episode, I was surprised Oliver didn't do it, because he knew his secret, and I personally, I'm like, I know he's. I don't even know if he's not killing people or is killing people. It's really hard to tell at this point. But when they had the thing in the premiere, and I spent a bunch of time on this when I was talking about Rene in the other episode, because he just goes around shooting handguns at people. But in the premiere for this season, when they did like the homage to the first episode, Oliver killed that one dude because he like beat him up, and it was like all he did was use like martial arts, and it was like, you can't know my secret, and that's way less of a thing. It's like, oh, the mayor actually knows how to fight. That's not even that big of a deal of a secret compared to this guy literally knows that the Green Arrow is the Mayor Oliver Queen, and he let him live. And I was like, I don't think this is smart. Like, as much as, you know, the whole justice system and all that stuff, not killing people, this is probably one of those situations where it's like he could easily be like, you know, I can't let you share my secret or whatever. And then he kills Church, and that would have made a ton of sense. But instead, he knocks him out, and I think he was talking to the human target. It was like, you know, so your secret's safe, and he's like, I hope so. And I'm like, that's dumb. Like, that is real stupid to just let this guy live and be like, I sure hope so. Because he could have even told the cops and just been like, yeah, the mayor is definitely the Green Arrow. Like, he wouldn't even have to do that himself. I mean, considering all the connections that he had, it wouldn't have been too crazy if he would have escaped prison, and then, you know, the cops go after Green Arrow, they capture him, and then, you know, he busts out of jail, or, you know, any number of people that he controls bust him out of jail, and he's like, sweet, I'm back in the city, and the Green Arrow's gone now. So it was just crazy. I'm like, he shouldn't have let that guy live. But I mean, it still mattered, because exactly what I thought would happen technically still happened, because Church tells Prometheus that Oliver, you know, is Green Arrow. So I don't know what that means. We still don't know what that Prometheus is doing, but at least now we know, like, that he officially killed, or she, they could just be a voice modulator thing. But that person has officially killed off Church. So Church is dead. They killed all the cops and stuff, which I thought was interesting that they didn't show it. I don't know if that means we're going to get some mystical stuff or what's going to happen, because people were dead like really far distances, and they were just on the street. It was just a normal street. Prometheus technically could have been up in the building and shooting down at them, but there were a ton of cops, and all of them were dead, and didn't seem to have any effect on Prometheus. Prometheus didn't seem injured or wounded in any way, shape, or form. Those two words are like the exact same thing, but you know what I mean. And I just thought that was interesting. I was like, okay, you know, it's also one of those things where it's like, oh, we don't know how to, you know, explain this within the laws of physics, but, you know, it's super cool and, you know, villainous. But considering it's a comic book thing, you know, it could just be that, you know, they did this sort of typical thing where it's like they somehow managed to beat all these people off screen, or it could be, you know, something supernatural. I mean, especially with them adding, you know, like Flash and stuff like that, they've gone a bit supernatural, you know, with Arrow. They kind of stray away from that for the most part, because they kind of leave that to Flash to have, you know, superpowers and stuff, and Arrow is still just criminals and stuff like that. But who knows who the heck this person is going to end up being? But they have some crazy vendetta. I don't know if this is just going to be like, hey, I'm Prometheus, basically I want to kill you because you're an excellent archer. I don't know how this is going to play out, but we're finally getting to the main story arc of Prometheus as the villain. So we're episode 5. So they've gotten rid of Church. So he's no longer an issue as a villain unless they do some crazy Lazarus Pit stuff. So he's gone, and now we have our main villain, I would assume, for the rest of the season. So I am excited to see where they take Prometheus. The promo seemed interesting with Prometheus just going around basically trying to draw out Oliver and just killing off a bunch of random people. So still hard to see. Hard to say exactly what's going to be happening there or what the purpose is, because the whole thing is like, you know, every time Church was close to killing Oliver, it's like, hey, Prometheus comes in, I don't want you doing this. This is your, you know, second warning and stuff. You know, Prometheus was about to kill Church and shot the arrow and everything. And it's like, that was your second warning, and then, you know, you kill him at the end. But we still don't know what the heck the deal is. Is it just a crazy person that just wants to fight the Green Arrow because they're a great archer? They're like a million different things, so who knows what the heck the case is going to be there. But I enjoyed this episode. I think the flashbacks were fine for this one. I feel like they didn't connect as much as they normally do. I feel like there was like a slight connection, and it was more about like obviously in the past it was really focused on the stuff with Victor wanting to kill Oliver and Oliver wanting to kill Victor, but also um, kind of that sense of story where it's like, hey, you're supposed to have, like, he has this mission, like that's the reason he went to Russia and he still hasn't completed that mission. So there are a couple of little stories in there. I didn't feel like, I mean, any of them really connected to the main, the present day storyline outside of the fact that he has a mission that he just needs to complete. And I think it may have connected a little bit more to Rene than it actually did to Oliver, and if I'm being completely honest. And it was more about, this is, you as a person, and this is your mission right now. But sometimes you kind of got to look back, because with Oliver in the flashback, he was kind of scared, to complete his mission, the promise that he made. And for Rene, it was more, Oliver was scared to go forward, and Rene was kind of scared to go backwards to, like, at his worst moments. And Oliver was scared to go forward because it was from one of his worst moments in his past. So I think it had a lot more of a connection to Rene than it actually did to Oliver in this episode. But I still thought it was fine. They even throw in the little, like, last second reference at the end that the human target was also in the flashback. But I like what they're doing with it. And Anatoly's helping Oliver out, and it's like, Victor wants you dead, you want Victor dead, but we can't go after him because he's way too connected. So things are gonna, escalate, and Oliver still has to figure out how he's gonna, end up going to this family and saying, hey, your daughter's dead. He's been there for months now. I would assume it's been months. So he's been there for such a long time, and he's still just afraid to go to this family. So we still have that. Of course, we still have his rage in general against Victor, but I enjoyed the flashbacks. They're fairly simple. They did have, like I said, they didn't tie in as much as I feel like the other episodes have, but they tied in just enough, and it was enough new stuff too that I was actually okay with it, even though a whole episode pretty much was just them in the bar for most of it. But I was still fine with the flashbacks for this. Of course, I definitely want to know what you guys thought about this episode, though. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, and of course, I want to know what you guys think about Prometheus. What is the plan for this character? Why does this villain want to go against Oliver? What is Prometheus going to do now that they know the Green Arrow is actually the same person as the Mayor Oliver Queen? Like, how is that going to affect this character as how they go up against Oliver? Although based on the promo, it doesn't seem like it has any effect. It seems like they're just killing random people and it doesn't matter. It's just like, hey, I kind of just want you to come out so we can fight. That seems like what it is. It's just, I'm calling you out by killing off a bunch of random people. You have to find me, or I'll just get through my whole little kill list and then I'll find you, or something like that. Which, knowing that the Green Arrow is Oliver Queen, that could easily happen. So who knows? We may have also been introduced to Prometheus outside of the costume. There's only like one character that could be, and that would probably be Felicity's boyfriend, but I kind of doubt that that's the case. Hopefully not. That would be kind of meh. It's just like, why? So a why sort of thing. But especially knowing, now that Prometheus knows Oliver is Green Arrow, that would just add another little element to it. Like, oh, you used to date my ex-fiance and you're the Green Arrow, and this is what she does, even though he, of course, doesn't know that. But I don't know. I want to know your predictions on what's going to happen with Prometheus and what this villain is there for. Like, why is Prometheus even going after Oliver, like, at all? It just doesn't seem to really care about having some great evil plan. Like Tobias had, this ultimate plan to bring all these different, gangs together because he already controlled them. And Prometheus just seems like, hey, don't kill the Green Arrow. I kind of wanted to kill him myself, but I don't really know. So I want to know your theories on that. And of course, what you guys thought about the episode in general. So please comment below, let me know. And thanks for watching.